Most people watching these reviews on YouTube know that I really love medieval and Renaissance history, and this is another one in that category. This book is by Natalie Zemon Davis. Don't know if you can tell by the glare there, but the book is called The Return of Martin Guerre. And Natalie Zemon Davis is, she specializes in mostly Renaissance and early modern French history, sort of like Robert Darnton does. And I picked this book up out of curiosity. I knew that they made a movie out of it, even though I'd never seen the movie. And the premise of the book sounded really, really fascinating. It's about a man who pretends to be someone else. It's a case history. It's not a novel or anything that's really happened. And I think it, obviously uncovers a lot of fascinating things about, what people thought about identity and how they related to other people, and just, it's a historian's gold mine, but it's also probably a psychologist's gold mine, and I'll talk about it. It's just a really, really interesting story. All the more interesting because it's actually happened. Natalie Zemon Davis, to stop rambling for a bit, along with the likes of Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie, who is another French historian, and Carlo Ginzburg, both of whom she acknowledges in the introduction of The Return of Martin Guerre, by the way. All three of these people have carved out a relatively new niche in academic history. Instead of writing about the movers and the shakers, so to speak, the kings and the emperors, or the large-scale religious changes, she writes here specifically focused on a few families in mid-16th century France. And not particularly well-to-do families either. The reputations made by the people that exist within the covers were not the result of high birth or diplomatic achievement or power. The only reason the name Martin Guerre has any resonance to our ears is because his story is perhaps the most incredible since Odysseus, maybe. I mean, it's really a spectacular story. Except Guerre's has the virtue of being historical fact. Without any of the historiographic jargon that we may have come to cynically expect, Davis here has wonderfully sort of harnessed most of the elements that allow the casual reader to fully appreciate Martin Guerre's story. Not long after moving from the Basque village of Hendaye to Artigas, with his father Sanchi and his uncle Pierre, Martin Guerre, aged 13, married a woman named Bertrande de Raux. And after a period of restlessness and sexual impotence, they conceive a child, also named Sanchi, and soon afterwards he gets into a dispute with his father and runs away and never returns. From this point on, there are intermittent, lengthy discussions of property transfer in France at the mid-16th century, specifically detailing how Basque tradition stipulates that the property moves from Bertrand to Pierre, since Sanchi the Elder had already died. In another world far away, Arnaud de Tilly, also known as Pansette, or the Belly, for his well-defined paunch, is eager to move himself away from the monotony of the Seigneury of Sajas, which joins Henri II's. He joins Henri II's army. In one of the weaker and more speculative parts of the book, Davis here guesses that Arnaud and Martine might have both met somewhere while in the service of Henri II, in whose service the real Martine might have actually lost a leg. She speculates that they also might have traded intimate life stories and history to such an extent that Arnaud could then arrive at Artigas, as he did, proclaim himself the long-lost Martin Guerre, and insert himself into the lives of Pierre Guerre and Bertrand, who quickly learns of Dutille's imposter, but outwardly fervently maintains that he is really Martin Guerre. Pierre, however, decides to form an inquest into Panset's identity, suspecting that something's a little bit fishy. The inquest turns into a trial, perhaps unexpectedly, where witnesses, including Martin's friends, family, doctors, neighbors, can't agree on his identity. Some think that he is Martin Guerre, and others think that he's an imposter. In fact, Panset is such a good impersonator that about 1/3 of them say he is Martin, another third say he isn't, and the last third refuse to comment because they're so baffled, or that they fear retribution from a member of the village. Panset is found guilty, but appeals to an illustrious court in Toulouse, where the author of one of the first accounts of the story, Jean de Corat, sits as a judge. After careful consideration, he overturns the ruling of the lower court and announces Panset innocent. At that moment, a man with a wooden leg enters the courtroom, claiming to be Martin Guerre. One by one, everyone recognizes the newcomer, as Panset calls him, and within a matter of hours, Martin, who has been gone for several years, regains his reputation, family, and friends inside the courtroom. Corat sees the error of his previous judgment and sentences Panset to, first, an amende honorable, which is a traditional French assignation of culpability, and then death by hanging, which is a medieval punishment tied to avarice, especially in the medieval imagination. Davis ends again on a speculative note, suggesting that perhaps Corat found sympathy with Panset because of their common sympathy for Reformation ideas. Corat was and remained fairly liberal for the time. Given the time period, there were countless accusations slung back and forth of faithlessness and apostasy. However, the book is much too short on this, in particular, too underdeveloped to really investigate this, look into this further. Interesting, too, is what Davis never explicitly takes much time to discuss, but nevertheless lurks underneath the surface, which are ideas of identity, gender, property acquisition, sort of the incipient capitalism that's working its way through Europe, and what it means to belong to a community in 16th century France. So while a casual reader can enjoy this book for its unique historical story, its niche, those whose interest is more academic have a lot to look at here too. For those interested in the more academic approach, I'd also recommend reading another book alongside this called it's by a man named Valentin Grubner, Groebner, and the book is called Who Are You? Identification, Deception, and Surveillance in Early Modern Europe. And for pretty obvious reasons that can shed a lot of light on this book. It takes some time to fill out some of the undercurrents in Davis's thought that she only alluded to here. But this is a pretty, it reads at quite a clip, and it's very, very short, 125 pages, with some notes at the end and stuff. A fascinating story, and it actually happened. Imagine. The Return of Martin Guerre by Natalie Zemon Davis.